So today I thought to discuss or to bring, so we were going to discuss compassion. Particularly the practice that we're going to do is Tong Len. So let me just start with what is compassion. So compassion, the way I like to think about it is it's a form of love. And compassion is what love does when it sees the brokenness of the world, when it sees difficulty and pain. So it's love in the face of suffering. And in that way, I think it's the most Buddhist Brahmavihara. And again, the four Brahmaviharas, metta, compassion, mudita, and upekkha, equanimity. So in a sense, I think that compassion is correct practice of the first noble truth of there is suffering. So if we know that there's suffering, what do we do with it? We develop compassion towards it. Okay, good. What else? So there's some other ways to think of compassion. That it is the desire that suffering diminish in generally somebody else, but then compassion towards yourself is the desire for your own suffering to go down. But I think that it's important to have this element of, like, how to put this, sweetness and love. It's not just, oh, I want this to go away. That's not compassion. It's like, oh, I want, like, it's like this attentive being with the suffering. And it's like, oh, I want you to be relieved from this. And it's really sincere. And so as like a seeding exercise, to seed what compassion is and to feel it. And then we're going to build the whole rest of the class on this. We're going to do a visualization, an imagination of remembering when we've experienced compassion, when we've been the recipient of compassion. So, okay, good. Let's all straighten up. Push the crown of the head up towards the ceiling. Close the eyes. Listen to this bell ring. And dissipate. Very good. So think back to a time when you were the recipient of compassion. When someone was engaging with you in such a way that you could feel their sincerity, you could feel that they were attuning to you, that they wanted to soothe you, that they saw and understood your suffering and wanted it to diminish. So think back to that moment and notice how you feel. And see if you can mentalize the other person and mentalize yourself. That means understand your own psyche, understand their psyche. And then now also notice what this receiving of compassion does to you. Like, how does the body feel? Is there a relaxation? Is there a sense of nourishment? Okay, so we'll come out of the meditation. Could everybody get in touch with that? Just maybe nod your heads if you could. Okay. Did anybody have any trouble getting in touch with having received compassion? Just speak up or say something if you didn't, if you couldn't get in touch with that. Okay, good. I'm going to assume we all can. So then that's the seed. To develop compassion, we have to first have received it and kind of go back to it and really know what it feels like. Okay, good. So then, in a sense, we're going to base the whole rest of the class on that feeling and on that experience. Good. And now, as kind of like a preliminary note, I wanted to talk about bodhicitta before we get into the class further. So this is both a point I wanted to discuss, it's very relevant, but it's also another way to set the context. So bodhicitta, and I may have mentioned this before, I don't know. But bodhicitta is the desire to awaken for the benefit of all beings. So it's the desire to become enlightened, to work through all your troubles, to actualize, etc., become liberated for the benefit of others. And it's very, very important. And so let me talk about that. And also, I'll do a little bit of context. This mostly comes from, this idea of bodhicitta comes from the Mahayana Buddhism, and it's shared between Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism. It's absent in Theravada, although that's not a critique of Theravada. So bodhicitta is just really smart, and it was a later development in Buddhism, and it helps militate against some of the problems that happen in spiritual practice. One of the issues with spiritual practice is that we have this sense of doing it for me. I'm trying to awaken. I'm trying to get better. And like you sit in a corner, you face the wall, you meditate, it's solitary. It seems like it's not very involved with others. You're involved with your own psychology, blah, blah, blah. And, and then there's a sense that is natural and okay, that's fine. It's fine. And it's wholesome. It is completely wholesome to want to wake up and for you to be relieved of suffering. But there's like a trap there, because if you stay there, you don't progress. Also, if you can start the path, if you can start your practice with this bodhicitta, this desire to awaken for others, then everything goes more quickly and easily. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, when I practice from a place of bodhicitta, when I reflect on bodhicitta, everything goes better. Like my practice is easier. When I forget about it, I'm like, oh, my practice, all this stuff's not going well, and I kind of get whiny and have all these problems. But then if you think about how your action can benefit others, it just like levels you up immediately. It's totally like a cheat. I'd strongly recommend taking that on board. And also a little bit more about this. It is okay to fake it until you make it. So you want to fake it until you make it. You might not feel it super strong. Just like Jessica, you were talking about struggling with mudita. You're like, you weren't having this this incredible transcendental experience of mudita. It's fine. What matters is, are you applying effort, and are you moving in that direction? What are your intentions? So that's the same point with bodhicitta. So I'll mention a few more notes. So I was just talking to this friend of mine, Evan, before this call, and we were talking about bodhicitta, and he was saying it's like all four Brahma Viharas, so loving kindness, compassion, mudita, and equanimity, all kind of rolled into one, but then put into action. So like there's this like action and motivation type element to it. So then this will be your homework. So of course, I'm going to keep recommending that you do your 6 acts of generosity a day, just helping someone out, doing something sweet. It can be very minor, very small, but what matters is the intention. And see if you can generate bodhicitta coupled with those acts of generosity. So when you make that act of generosity, you're like, oh, may I be of service to you? And I hope that also, and also draw motivation for your practice from that act, from that feeling of generosity. Okay, that's it for bodhicitta. Very briefly, are there any comments on that before we get into Tong Len? Any comments? Or questions? Okay, cool. All right, moving on to Tong Len. So Tong Len is completely awesome. I love Tong Len. It is one of the recurrent practices that I always do throughout the years. The more I do it, the more I like it. I can't say enough good about it. Um, um, let me tell you what it is, and then we'll talk about the benefits. So you sit there, and so I'll go ahead and guide it. So just go ahead and straighten up, push the crown of the head up towards the ceiling. Now feel the whole body, and let the whole body settle. And now what we're going to do is think of all of the suffering of the whole world. All the suffering of all the beings in the whole world, or even the whole universe, throughout space and time. There's so much suffering. And now tune into that, going back to our earlier exercise about having tuned into compassion. And get in touch with this quality of really wanting their suffering to diminish. This is not a striving, kind of craving type desire. This is like a sweet, gentle kind of understanding of their situation and just a natural desire that they be well. Okay, and now on the in-breath, we're going to feel and see black smoke coming into us, and that symbolizes the suffering of the world. It kind of pools in a dark blackness in front of us. It comes into the nose and then down into our heart. And then when we exhale, we give away all our peace and happiness to all beings. And we see that as white light, maybe silvery moonlight, maybe like clouds, fog. It's helpful to visualize it. So let's try that one more time. So inhaling all this black smoke, which symbolizes all the suffering of all beings. And then exhaling white light, silvery moonlight, representing love and peace and happiness. And that all beings, all living beings are the recipient of this. That's basically the practice. Now, some people find this kind of weird and challenging, and it's completely okay if you do. They think, oh, I'm going to take on the suffering. Oh, I'll get ill. Generally speaking, I don't know of anybody who's ever gotten ill from this practice. It brings about tremendous happiness, tremendous compassion. I can tell you from having done this practice, I really know how to be with the suffering of others. When other people suffer, I don't squirm or I don't actually suffer. I feel like love and competence. I feel like, okay, I know what I need to do. I know how to be with this. And it has helped me so much. Okay, so now there are more instructions, and I'll get into why we want to do this, benefits, and things to watch out for. But are there any questions right now? And is anybody feeling uncomfortable about this? And if you are, I'll talk to you about it, of course. But then also, if you just don't want to do the practice, it's totally fine. You can do mudita or metta during this practice period. But is everybody okay with where we're at so far? All right. Okay, great. Oh, Artur, you have a question?
Yeah, no, just a comment.
Sure.
Because I used to do this in my bus rides, commuting time, a couple of more than a year ago.
Yeah.
And then just a comment that actually this is how I feel, that when you inspire, when you breathe in all the smoke,
inhale.
it's not like inhale. When you inhale all the smoke, it's not like the smoke is in your body, right? It's more like the smoke is neutralized,
yes.
And then it just transforms into light.
That's right.
So I guess it's better for you to think like this,
Yes.
especially if you feel like, okay, I maybe I will get sick or something.
Right.
No, you're transforming this energy
Right.
into something good.
Yes, thank you for adding that, Arthur. That's right. So I'll say like you metabolize, you take on and metabolize, or or I mean, kind of however you do it, it's fine because I don't think it's hard to screw this practice up. So okay, good. Okay, no more questions. Then let me go over further into the talk. So here's I'm just going to read out actually Wikipedia's description of this practice. So in the practice, one visualizes taking in the suffering of oneself and of others on the in-breath, and on the out-breath giving recognition, compassion, and succor to all sentient beings. As such, this is a training in altruism. So this is really good for training out of our egocentrism. The function of the practice is to reduce selfish attachment, increase a sense of renunciation, purify karma by giving and helping, develop and expand loving kindness and bodhicitta. The practice of Tong Len involves all 6 Mahayana paramitas: giving, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom. And it says these are the practices of a bodhisattva. And a bodhisattva is someone who works for the salvation of all beings. Okay, why would we want to do this practice? Well, so, I mean, again, I principally view this as mostly a compassion practice. And compassion, in my mind, and now I'm looking back and taking a attachment lens, like attachment from attachment theory from Western psychology. So there are 5 elements of secure attachment: safety, attunement, recognition, knowing, soothing, expressed delight, joy, and encouragement of self-development and exploration. So in my mind, when you're doing a compassion practice, you're really leaning into and developing the attunement factor and the soothing factor. So it's helping you understand the minds of all beings, especially when they suffer. And this is important. It's helping you understand your own mind, especially when you suffer. And it's showing you how to attune correctly to yourself and others. And it's also having you soothe all beings and yourself at the same time. So by working on those elements, we're actually repairing our suboptimal attachment conditioning. Good. All righty. Let's see here. Okay, the actual phrases that I use are taking on all the suffering, giving away all my peace. Taking on all the suffering, giving away all my peace. Okay. Now, before we get started, what should you watch out for? Okay, so first off, Tong Len and compassion practices get a little bit weird. They can be a bit uncomfortable occasionally, and if it gets a little uncomfortable, it's okay. You want to have it be a little bit uncomfortable occasionally. Also, subtle is significant. So even if you don't feel it, there's like a raging, flow, a river of compassion, that's okay. It might just be a little bit. It's fine. Another issue: know your own window of tolerance. Know where your, what I call spiritual metabolism is. Are you kind of getting near the edge where, you know, you're going to fall into the pit, or are you okay? And if you're getting near your edge where you're about to have a problem, just back off the practice. Either quit meditating or do loving kindness, do a concentration practice, however. Another point that I want to bring up is, so Tong Len teaches us how to be with our own suffering. And so when we're doing this practice, we're being with the suffering of all beings, and that includes ourselves. And so I just want to give you a tip that whenever you find suffering arising in your life, look at the suffering. Don't turn away from it. Look at it. And then reflect, and then have this, find this place of compassion towards it, and then reflect on how all beings experience it. So for example, confusion. I've experienced a lot of confusion in my life, and it's distressing and it's very unpleasant. And so whenever I'm confused now, I try to remember, oh, all beings experience confusion. And may I metabolize my confusion and the confusion of all beings. And this kind of gives you a sense of connection, attunement with others, so you don't feel as isolated. Also, and this is very important, all afflictive states, all afflictive emotional states rest on the belief of an individual separate self. But if we go ahead and reflect on others and reflect on how all beings experience this, then the isolation will be less. And when the isolation is less, the afflictive emotional state will start to collapse more quickly. Okay, good. That is basically it. Let's open it up to questions. Is everybody clear on the practice? Philippe?
Yeah, Cedric. I remember reading Pema Chodron. You know, she really developed. She really taught a lot of Tong Len, and she developed this thing that she called Tong Len on the spot. Have you read about this?
No, tell me.
It's brilliant. I think it's brilliant. It's a technique to apply Tong Len to your own suffering on the spot. So you're like, you're suffering right now, you know, whatever, and so you use your own suffering. I think it's what you just said. Basically, you use your own suffering, and you imagine that all beings that are going through the same experience right now, you breathe. So you use your own suffering and imagine that whoever else, whatever other beings are experiencing the same thing at the same time. So there's a community of suffering, right? That you're part of, and so you breathe in your own suffering. You turn toward it, as you said, and breathe it in, and then breathe out the clarity and peace. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Tong Len on the spot. So I don't know. I think that's what you just said, right? What you just described.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, but I love the verbiage. Tong Len.
Isn't it great? Yeah.
Yeah. Super.
Yeah, and she has a description of it on the internet.
Very cool. Yeah, thank you, Billy.